Hello again, Linux fans. Today I decided I was going to do another Linux video after my last video on Windows, sort of get back to Linux a little bit here. And today I'm going to be discussing redirection. Linux is very powerful, and one of the things that makes it as powerful as it is it has the ability to redirect data. It can either redirect data from one command into another command as input, or redirect a command out of a command into another command as output. So you can move data around, you can view it on the screen, you could save it to a file, or you can process it in any other command, because Linux doesn't care where you redirect the data to or from. It just redirects it from wherever you specify to wherever you specify. So before we go in depth into redirection, we have to know a little bit about how the system works. Okay, first of all, commands. Okay, every command produces either an output, in other words, it succeeds, or an error, it fails. Now, Linux, as you probably heard me allude to in previous videos, if it succeeds, you really don't see much other than if you ask for output or you get the prompt back. If you don't get an error message, it usually worked. If it fails, then it'll definitely tell you that it failed. So these commands, they have output and they usually send it to the screen. Okay, if a command executes properly, it displays its output. If it fails, of course, it displays what the error message is. Most commands require some kind of input, usually input that is typed in at the keyboard. However, as we will discuss, it can get its input from another command. So investigating further, we want to look at our standard I/O, which means input-output, I/O devices. And in Linux, it has certain default I/O devices. Okay, the standard in, denoted by STDIN, okay, that's the standard input. And by default, that's usually going to be your keyboard. Okay, standard output, okay, STDOUT, standard output, that's usually going to be the monitor. And of course, standard error is usually going to be the monitor also, because as you're doing your Linux, you see what you're doing on the monitor. Those are the defaults. Those can be changed, as we will now discuss. Okay, if you look at your standard I/O, okay, you could see in the diagram, your standard input, we call that channel or input 0. You'll hear it referred to both ways, as you'll see later on in the video. The standard input, okay, goes into the command, and it'll either produce a standard output to the monitor or this error output into the monitor. Now in the diagram, they kind of look the same, but it's the same monitor, even though in the picture they're different. It shows two different monitors, but it just means the monitor, basically. Okay, the first redirection we will discuss is what they call the pipe command. That looks like a straight up and down bar, and you get it by using the shift and the slash. Okay, that gives you the pipe on a standard keyboard. What the pipe does is it simply redirects the output of the first command to be the input of the second command. Okay, so you execute a command, and then you're piping it from the first command into the second command. So the first command executes, it goes through the pipeline into the second command. So that's how the pipe works. And as an example, okay, if we use our ls-l command, let's say we don't want to see it immediately on the screen, or we want to be able to control it. There's a command in Linux, which we'll discuss in another video, called less. Basically, that saves it into like a scroll window. So if the output is too big to fit in the page, you could scroll up or down in less, and you could look at your output. There's also a command called more. More lets you go down, so you can read it page by page, but more doesn't let you go up. So as you see a lot in Linux, less is more, okay, so to speak, because less actually lets you do more than more does, because with less, you could go either way, okay? The redirect command, we could also use the greater than sign, okay? Let's say you have a command, and then you use the little arrowhead looking, or the greater than sign, and then a file name. What that does is it actually puts the output into a file, which you could then do anything with that file. So that allows you to take your command, store it in a file, and then you could do whatever you want with it within the file, okay, or a device or whatever. It saves the output. You could analyze it later. They use this a lot in scripting. Okay, when we get into bash shell scripting and script interpreters and things of that nature, this is very important when you script. Okay, one thing that's very important, and we'll get into this a little later when we go to the sister command, the double arrow. If a single arrow is used, the file will be overwritten. In other words, the old data will be completely erased with the new data that you're putting in now. So if you want to save what's in there, you don't want to use this particular type of a redirect, because this redirect will completely erase what's in it and replace it with the new data. Redirecting the error. Okay, redirecting the error is important because sometimes you don't want your error messages to appear on the screen. So what you do in a case like that is you see the symbol 2. Okay, your error channel, as we will see in a diagram later, the second channel, or channel number 2, is your error file. So if you use the command and in a space and in the number 2 with your little arrowhead pointing, it will put it into a special file called the error file. This allows you to capture your error message for analysis and debugging. And again, this is very, very important in scripting, because if the script doesn't run, you're going to want to debug it. Scripting is a lot like programming, only instead of compiling it, you interpret it. Very similar principles. So they both use what's called debugging when things don't work properly. So sending your error data to a file allows you to capture it so you could analyze it and use it for debugging later. Okay? Appending. This is what I was alluding to with the single arrow. If you use the double arrow, you're not overwriting the data that's in the file. You're appending it to the end. So if you have, again, a script, okay, or something of that nature, you want to collect data over time, or multiple data, or data on multiple people or multiple objects, what you would do is you would use 2 arrowheads, and that would add the new data to the bottom of the file that contains the old data. So you're in effect creating a running record of your data. And this is very important. Okay, you use it a lot for what they call log files, because with a log file, you don't want to wipe out what's in there. You want to keep a running record over time. And if you want to do that with your error messages, then again, you would put the 2 in front of the arrowheads, because the 2 basically denotes that you want to record errors and not just the standard output. Okay? In summary, as you can see in the following chart, okay, the arrow facing to the left redirects the standard input. Okay, if it's facing to the right, it redirects the standard output. Okay, without preceding numbers, it'll assume a 1. If you want the error, you put a 2. Okay, the same thing with the double arrows. And that appends either way, either the input or the output or the errors. Okay, getting into the channels. Input is channel 0. Output is channel 1, and error is channel 2. So to sum it up, you have 0 for the input, 1 for the output, 2 for the error. Moving on, okay, if you want to combine your redirection. We could combine redirection to capture results, whether they're input or output. And I give an example here with the ls command where I'm putting the output into the list file, and then the list file is being used as input for the error log anywhere where there's mistakes in the list file. And again, you could be using that in a script where you script the data file and you're appending the results, okay, into the results, okay, and if you use the 2, then that becomes your error log. So that's important uses in scripting. You could combine, you could pipe, you could do all kinds of different combinations. This is limited only by your imagination. The no clobber variable. That's a special variable that's set aside to prevent accidentally overwriting files that you might not overwrite. So you could set no clobber, okay, if you use the -0, you're setting it to prevent overwriting. If you're setting it to a +0, you're allowing it to be overwritten. And of course, when you're done with your particular scripting or terminal session or whatever it is, you're going to want to unset the no clobber command. And an example here is with the ls. Okay, if you use the arrow with the pipe symbol, that's going to override the no clobber variable and allow you to intentionally overwrite your data. So that gives you a little more user control. You could set the no clobber to prevent accidentally overwriting data, but if you want to overwrite the data and the no clobber is set on and you want to keep it on for the rest of your script, but you just want to sort of override it for this one command, then you would use the arrow with the pipe, okay, the redirect with the pipe. So you could also use what's called the T command. The T command allows you basically to redirect it 2 places at once. Okay, so you could see it on the screen while you're putting it in a file. And this is very, very useful if you're doing the type of a command where you want to see the output live while you're doing it, but you also want to capture it in a file for later use. Basically, it goes in, and like a T, okay, the output will go 2 places at once. And the 2 places are usually the screen and a file. And you can set that file to be anything you want. So that's basically our wrap up for the Linux redirection different commands. And I hope you learned something and enjoyed the video. And I hope you catch my next one.